So let me start by setting some expectations because this matters. This is not a video about getting approved. It's not about winning a claim, and it's definitely not about shortcuts. This is a clarity video because a lot of veterans are confused about Nexus letters, and confusion is where people get hurt financially, emotionally, and sometimes by making decisions they didn't need to make yet. So we're going to slow this down. No urgency, no pressure, just a clear explanation of what a Nexus letter actually is, and just as important, what it is not. So Nexus letters get talked about like there's some kind of secret weapon. You hear things like, you need this to get approved. This boosts your chances. The VA won't approve without one. And when veterans hear that, especially if they've already been denied or are stuck, desperation kicks in. That's when people overspend. That's when they rush. And that's when they get sold something they didn't fully understand. So this video exists to shut that cycle down. In plain English, a Nexus letter is medical opinion evidence. That's it. It's a written opinion from a licensed medical professional that addresses causation. Whether one condition is at least as likely as not related to military service or related to another service-connected condition. One thing it doesn't is decide claims. It does not approve anything. Keep this in mind. The VA decides claims. A Nexus letter is simply one piece of evidence that may be considered alongside your service records, your treatment history, your exams, and the rest of your file. In some cases, a Nexus letter is used. In other cases, it's completely unnecessary. It always depends on the full record. Now, this part is important because this is where people get misled. A Nexus letter is not a guarantee. It does not override bad evidence. It does not fix missing service records, and it cannot force the VA to approve anything. If someone is selling like this is a magic document, that's your first red flag. The VA weighs evidence. It does not obey paperwork. A Nexus letter can be considered. It cannot command. So this helps people understand the system instead of fighting it. The VA isn't asking, did a doctor write a letter? They're asking, does the total evidence make sense together? If a Nexus letter contradicts the medical record, ignores unfavorable evidence, or skips over important facts, it loses weight fast. That's why some veterans submit Nexus letters and still get denied. Not because Nexus letters are useless, but because evidence has to align. Now, there are some situations where veterans explore Nexus letters. Usually those situations involve complexity. For example, secondary conditions where the connection isn't obvious, long time gaps between service and diagnosis, conditions with multiple possible causes, medical relationships that require explanation, not assumption. In those cases, some veterans look into whether a medical opinion could help clarify causation. Notice the wording here. I'm not saying you need one. I'm saying some veterans explore this depending on their situation. One of the most damaging ideas out there is that every veteran needs a Nexus letter. That's not true. If your service records already show the condition clearly, if your medical records already connect the dots, if the VA exam already supports service connection, adding a Nexus letter doesn't automatically help. And sometimes it just adds confusion. More paperwork does not equal better evidence. Sometimes it just means more contradictions. I want you to pause right now, intentionally, because at this stage, no one should feel rushed to do anything. If all you take from this first part is a Nexus letter is evidence, not a result, then this video did its job. In the next part, we'll talk about common misconceptions, how to evaluate providers without naming names, who should not pursue this at all, and how to protect yourself from pressure. But for now, the most important thing is understanding, not action. Now, if you watched the first part, you already understand the foundation. A Nexus letter is evidence, not a result. The second part exists to protect you because most harm around Nexus letters doesn't come from the VA. It comes from confusion, pressure, and people overselling something that was never meant to carry guarantees. So now we're going to clean up misconceptions, talk about judgment, and make sure you know how to evaluate information without being pushed. So let's address the biggest myths directly. First, the VA requires a Nexus letter. Now that's false. The VA requires evidence, not a specific document. A Nexus letter is just one possible form of medical opinion evidence. Second, a Nexus letter guarantees approval. Also false. No document guarantees anything. Anyone promising outcomes is misrepresenting how the VA works. Third, any doctor can write a Nexus letter. Not really. That's not necessarily true. Credentials matter. Scope matters. Record review matters. A letter written without reviewing your full file isn't strong evidence. It's incomplete evidence. Fourth, and this surprises people, more Nexus letters are better. Often that's not true. More letters can mean more contradictions, more confusion, and less clarity for the VA reviewer. So this isn't about volume. It's about alignment. So this part helps remove frustration. The VA doesn't ask, did a doctor write this? They ask, does this opinion make sense when we read it alongside everything else? They look at it whether the clinician reviewed the entire medical record. Unfavorable evidence was acknowledged. The reasoning is medically sound. Conclusions are explained, not just asserted. A Nexus letter that pretends contrary evidence doesn't exist loses weight quickly. That's why some veterans submit Nexus letters and still get denied. Not because Nexus letters are useless, but because the opinion doesn't align with the record. Now, before mentioning any names, here are standards that apply to any provider. A credible medical documentation provider should use licensed board-certified clinicians, review your entire medical record, explain uncertainty honestly, make no promises about outcomes, be transparent about limitations. If someone guarantees approval, pressures you to act quickly, avoids discussing weaknesses in your file, or talks like they have influence over the VA, that's not help. That's pressure. And pressure has no place in this process. People sometimes ask who I've worked with when testing medical documentation providers. I did my own homework. I looked how they operate, how they communicate with veterans, and what people consistently say about their experience working with them. And one thing that stood out was their customer service feedback is consistently strong, especially around responsiveness, clarity, and setting expectations. Now that doesn't mean outcomes are guaranteed. No provider can guarantee that, but it does matter how veterans are treated during the process. And for me, that distinction is important, and it's why I'm comfortable acknowledging them as an optional resource while still emphasizing that documentation quality never replaces VA's decision-making process. With that said, I've worked with a few, including American medical experts, specifically to evaluate documentation quality, not outcomes. Understand though, this is optional. It does not guarantee anything, and it has nothing to do with how the VA decides claims. For transparency, I may have a referral relationship with some medical documentation providers, including AME, but that does not affect your claim decisions or guarantee any result. Now, this part doesn't get said enough, so I'll say it clearly. If your record already clearly supports service connection, you may not need this. If someone is pressuring you to move fast, pause. If money is tight, this should never be your first move. Evidence should serve you, not stress you. Sometimes the smartest decision is not adding more paperwork. All right, so here's the framing that protects people. A Nexus letter is not something you get. It's something you evaluate. You don't ask, should I buy one? You ask, does my record need clarification? That question alone saves veterans time, money, and regret. So just like American medical experts, the company I referenced before, you can actually schedule a free consultation with them so they can evaluate your file and see if a Nexus letter makes sense. Now, if you take nothing else from this video, take this. A Nexus letter is evidence, not a result. Anyone promising results is the wrong person to listen to. So you don't need to rush. You don't need to panic. And you don't need to buy clarity. Understanding the system is what protects you.